Hello, friends. Welcome into the Leadership Sandbox. I am Tammy J. Bond, and it is official. We've moved from the Playing in the Sandbox podcast to the Leadership Sandbox podcast. And you're probably going, well, Tam, why the change? Well, because disruption happens. And sometimes we need to create disruption so that we can get fresh eyes on what isn't really working and or what we think might be working but isn't turning the results that we want. And so the team and I were talking about what are we doing with the podcast this 2 years in, and what do we want it to be about? If not this, then what? I love that question. If you've been in the sandbox with me for too long, or at all, I should say. And when creating disruption, it sometimes creates a visibility or an awareness to something that you had a blind spot to. And I totally had a scotoma. I thought naming the podcast Playing in the Sandbox made sense, and made sense because it's the name of the book. So keep the two together and go with it. But then when I'm out talking with people, or I'm out bringing in new clients and putting them through our Leadership Sandbox training, I mean, hello, call it what it is. I'm developing leaders in the sandbox of the workplace. And yes, it is about playing in the sandbox. Still a great title, but not for the podcast, because if I'm a leader and I'm out scrolling looking for something to listen to, I'm not going to stop with playing in the sandbox. I'm going to stop on something that specifically says leadership, because I'm a leader and I want to learn and equip myself. So that's why the disruption with the brand change and the name change. And I'm excited that today we officially are launching Leadership Sandbox, and you're going to get to know a lot more about that, including we are dropping new episodes every week. You've got the second and fourth Thursdays going to be your longer episodes. And on those off weeks, they're going to be short little 7-minute strategies, 7-minute tips, tools, and strategies in 7 minutes with Tammy. I mean, how fun is that going to be? And they're going to be gritty, and they're probably going to be a little bit sassy. I think I'm going to bring a little more sassy out just for those 7-minute strategies. So you're not going to want to miss it next week. But for right now, you're in the Leadership Sandbox with Tammy J. Bond, and I'm excited to have you join me as we talk all about turning that conflict, right? Turning that conflict into collaboration. When disruption happens, we want to learn how to transform that into a collaborative and positive experience, not be stuck in conflict with it. That's what we're talking about today in the sandbox. So kick off your shoes, get ready to step into the Leadership Sandbox, prepared to learn 1, 2, or 3 new strategies that you can implement or apply tomorrow, today, in 5 minutes from now in your workplace. I'll see you on the inside. All right, welcome into the Leadership Sandbox. Let's dive in. I mean, could we just for a minute have a real gritty conversation around turning conflict into collaboration in the workplace? You see, we've been talking all month so far about the disruptive behaviors and what they are and how they mask themselves, and then how do you actually identify them, but then what do you do to tackle them? And now I'm going to take it one step further and say, and now how do you turn it into a positive change, not just for the individual that's causing the disruption, but for the team as a whole? You see, as leaders, we often focus on addressing the issue, but then we don't take the power of that issue and use it for something more to get our team collaborating. You see, I think it's best when we as leaders turn it over to the team to solve for their problem. I don't need to be the one to go in as the leader of the team. I let my people solve it internally for themselves. And they'll come to me. And I had one individual come to me and she said, I've asked for these 3 things repeatedly and I'm still not getting it. And it's getting a little bit frustrating. And, we were talking through with the challenge she was having with someone who was causing some disruption on the team. So I equipped her with the tools on how to go handle it. But I also knew when the timing was right for me to step in. And ultimately I did. But it's not because I didn't first just go and solve it for her. I wanted to give her the chance to solve it peer to peer, because that's important. And that's what we as leaders equip our people around us to solve problems in our absence. That's what makes them better. That's what makes us better. But let's face it, as leaders, we all see the disruptive behaviors, and whether it's that, corner eye roll that someone makes, right? Or someone who's constantly over talking, right? And, or shifting blame, right? Sometimes we let those things slide because we don't have time to deal with it. And that's okay sometimes. And it also often builds in intensity because we don't address it. And that let it slide sometimes turns into it's the norm, and the person thinks that they can get away with it. And by letting go of addressing it, right, it comes at a cost to the team. It comes at a cost to the culture because your other team members are watching you to see how you're going to deal with this disruptive behavior, this person that has this behavior pattern that's dominating in the room, right? That's condemning in the room. So I want to go beyond the obvious and get into what I'm calling the gritty about why we don't address these behaviors, and more importantly, how we can transform them for the better for the team. Because I think that if we don't get into the why behind why we don't address it, it's going to our behavior as the leader is going to continue, and then why would anyone change, right? Think about that for a minute. So all right, what are some of the disruptive behaviors that I've heard that and I've seen in the workplace, right? These actually, ironically, these disruptive behaviors are exactly what we've modeled our characters in the sandbox after. These exact behaviors. The constant naysayer, also known as negative Nelly, right? That behavior is someone who is negative about everything, shoots down every idea, absolutely doesn't care how good it is, doesn't even want to look at how good it is. It's just no. And while no is a complete answer, the negativity that follows that is something that can really be demoralizing to the whole team. Those individuals, those constant naysayers, the negative Nellies, they challenge every suggestion that comes up because either they know better or they're going to point out all of the flaws. And it sucks the energy and the creativity out of the room. And when I see this, especially at the executive level, when I see that you've got one of the team members is your constant negative Nelly, kind of the Eeyore of the group, I make it a point to pull CEOs aside to say, "Hey, have you noticed this? What do you notice about this behavior?" And they'll say, "Oh, yeah, that's just like Joe to be like that." Oh, okay. So we're allowing that behavior? Like that's okay? What do you think it might be causing us? And they've gotten so used to just allowing Joe to be the negative Nelly in the room that they don't actually see the impact that it's having on the rest of the team. And what we want to do is expose why it has an impact, what the impact is, and then how is it that we're going to address it? Because if we don't want to drain the team energy and we want creativity to flow, then we want to get ahead of or eradicate, I'll even say it that way, the negative Nelly. So leaders, why don't you address it? Well, a lot of leaders have fear of confrontation. This one leader about Joe, we'll say the negative Nelly was Joe. When I went to the CEO about it, the reality of why they didn't want to do it it was fear of confronting the person because of the personal relationship they had. And the truth of the matter is many leaders are conflict averse. People don't go into leadership because they like to deal with conflict. They go into leadership because, they love the company, they own the company, or they're passionate about the work, the outputs, or whatever their reason is. Everybody has one, right? But they don't want to open up that Pandora's box and deal with the potential fallout from calling out negative attitudes, negative Nellies. What that shows to your team is you're not willing to address the people that are impacting us negatively. And then it also kind of gives a perception of a power imbalance, which can be a problem too. You see, the naysayer might hold deep knowledge, right? That negative Nelly might be somebody who has an institutional level of knowledge of how we can perform better, or increase this product line, or increase the distribution of said product, whatever that is. They could be a high performer for you, but we've allowed them to be the negative one. So because we're not confronting it, why would they want to step up and change? I often think our negative Nellies, they're negative for a whole bunch of reasons, but sometimes I think they're just wanting to see if you're gutsy enough leader to step up and challenge them. And when you do, they do change that behavior. That attitude, though, can absolutely be toxic. And you as a leader, confronting that behavior is important. So rather than avoiding the issue, you want to redirect that into some critical thinking. You want to use that skepticism, that skeptical lens that negative Nellies bring into the room, that naysayers bring into the room, and turn it around. So if not this, then what? Okay, I hear you that you say that it isn't going to work. Tell me what you think would work. If not this, then what? Give them the chance to show you the other side. Sometimes that works tremendously well to actually expose that the negative person really doesn't have a better idea. They're just so stuck on being negative, and then we can deal with it at that level. Sometimes it's that they just wanted to be asked, and their negativity is a smokescreen, kind of camouflage, if you will, of what they really want because they don't know how to speak up for themselves. So you can reframe for the naysayer the negative into a positive. I'll even say it this way. So is that where you want to leave that? You know, those naysayers, they're really great at just dropping the bomb and letting it sit there and watching how it clears a room. And for me, no, I'm going to be like, so do you want to leave that there or you want to pick that back up and reframe it? How do we reframe that? You want to, as a leader, that's a really great skill set for you to have, especially with your negative Nelly naysayers. You want to help them to reframe the negative into the what else, what's next, what's possible. The other area where the other, I'll say, behavior that shows up. So we have naysayers or negative Nelly, and then we have the silent saboteur. And they're the ones that show up also pretty strong in the workplace. And so we're wanting to turn that conflict, those challenges around. We want to address the silent saboteur, but first you got to understand the behavior behind it. Usually this person agrees on action items in the meeting, right, with you or in the group, but then they quietly they plan how they're going to undermine it afterward, right? They'll miss deadlines, they'll ignore feedback, they'll they'll only do partial of the project. They'll go and talk to other employees, other team members about, you know, how, oh, I have to do this project, but you know, and they kind of can come across as being negative, but really it's just a way of them sabotaging, and they sabotage other people's energy to be able to get the work done. They'll go in and yes, they'll challenge your authority or challenge the authority in the room because they don't agree with it. And so we allow this. I'm not sure why, because to me, the silent saboteurs, they are often the ones that aren't completing tasks on time. And that's something I like to get ahead of real quickly. But when leaders don't address it, that's oftentimes because they don't have that direct evidence of what the cause is, right? Because it's really hard to call out those passive behaviors or the passive resistance, right? Because it's covert. They may not see that it's happening, but friend, your people know that it's happening. And if you don't address that behavior, even as subtle as the silent saboteur may be, you're actually going to make it more difficult in the long run for the whole team because they see that it's happening, right? So what I want you to do is get clear and get your evidence, right? Document everything, get clear on what they commit to and the by when. Silent saboteurs, you want to make sure they have the clarity of the by when, the what it looks like as an outcome, and the by when. And when you see that they're working underneath the surface, I pull them in close. I do. I would pull them in close, talk to them frequently, tell me how it's going. They're going to go, oh, why are you micromanaging me? I'm not. I'm just pulling you in close because I know that when I leave you unchecked, that's when you tend to have behaviors that don't support the team. And I give the examples of what those behaviors are. I'm telling you, this is going to be a gritty episode because I want you to get into solving for these silent saboteurs because your team wants you to. The silent saboteur, if you're overwhelmed with managing all the things, and you think that I can leave this person over here, even though, yeah, they're kind of skating by without hitting deadlines, and yeah, their work's late and all of that, it's impacting how others see you do your leadership role, right? If you have too much on your plate and you think it's just easier to ignore it, right, than to go and invest the time to deal with it, I promise you that that is going to build up into a bigger problem later. And worse, those silent saboteurs may not leave your employment, but they could actually cause those really great employees to want to leave. And that's not what we want, right? I don't, if I don't invest the time in the negative or in the silent saboteur, if I don't invest the time to heal that, to fix that, to dig that up and expose it and move it on and change it and show the team. I was a few weeks ago working with a team, and they had a bold conversation with their leader because there was some silent saboteuring going on. There was some negativity going on, all of these same behaviors that were disruptive, but they never saw the leader dealing with it. And they just sort of ignored it and like kind of ignored it. Like it just got to the point where, well, that's just what I don't have any power to change it. I've asked for it to be changed. The leader's not changing it with the individuals. So I'm just going to keep my head down and do my work. But that was like tearing at the fabric of the culture that they as a team said they wanted. And this one individual ended up having so much more power in the negative than the others that predominantly, like a team of 5, right? 4 of them were in the positive, but one was in the negative zone and the silent saboteuring. And that person had more power than the 4 combined in the way that it impacted the team. But that was just because we had to recreate how the team of 4 that were the positive ones, that were they meet their deadlines and they were passionate about the work, how they communicated with the manager. But the manager was overwhelmed with so many other things. They didn't realize the power that they had given that one individual by not addressing that saboteur. So you got to be firm with these conversations. I guess I could say be subtle yet firm, whatever that means. No, be firm. You go into that silent saboteur conversation and you talk to them about what it is that they're creating in that work environment, where you've asked for that accountability and where they're not meeting it. And so what more do they need? What resources do they need so that you can ensure that they're accountable for what they're responsible for on their side, right? Set the clear expectations, make it measurable, right? Give them the clear by when. Ask them what success for this looks like. Have frequent check-ins with them. Keep them close. You bring the silent saboteur in close, and actually, just like that negative Nelly, that naysayer, and it actually also it transforms them because they have no way to they don't have wiggle room at that point. But what that also shows, because your team, the team is going to be seeing that you're pulling that person in close, that's actually going to help turn that conflict that they're creating into something positive for the team. You're going to transform that behavior into positive change because you're investing time. And a lot of times, both with the naysayer, negative Nelly, and the silent saboteur, they want the time. They want the time from you. They want that attention. And I know I rolled my eyes with that one. The over talker, I'm moving on. Your number 3 is your over talker. And that behavior, I tell you what, they dominate in meetings, right? They interrupt, they overtalk people, they push conversations to their own agenda, right? Without, they don't consider other viewpoints. They're pushing, right? The rest of the team stops contributing because why? And I do this a lot when I'm out with teams. I always know the one that's the over talker, the first to talk, is I'll actually say, Fred, I love that you're always the first to want to speak up and share your thoughts. I would appreciate it though if you could push pause and wait for the other team members. When all of the other team members have spoken, then you get to talk. Or when 4 of the 7 other team members have spoken, Fred, then I want to hear from you. But I want you to wait till 4 people actually give their input, give their tips, give their thoughts, give their advice, whatever it is, right? Provide their solution or whatever. And usually Fred is like, "What? I have to wait." Well, I just, because they don't like dead space in the room. I used to be a Fred. I used to be someone that was an over talker because I didn't mean to be. I just like to talk. But also, if nobody else was, I'll give an idea. But you forget that there are processors in the room that need time to process. And if they're always waiting for Fred, or in my case, Tammy, to be the one to talk, why would they contribute? So you're silencing other people. I would be silencing other people with innocently so. And it wasn't until I had a leader back in the day come to me and say, and actually they did. They said, I need for you to refrain from being the first to talk and try to be the last. Try to be the last. And then I had someone teach me this is they said, Tammy, before you speak up, I want you to ask, is this a teaching moment? And is it something that's good for everyone? because the overtalker a lot of times will just talk to hear themselves, right? And the rest of the team stops contributing. And then there's no space left for anybody except Fred or Tammy, in my case, to speak up, right? So I'm grateful that I had leaders that addressed it and addressed it early on with me in my very early days of my career path. But leaders today who don't address it, oftentimes they fear that well, at least Fred's talking because nobody else is, and then that means somebody's engaged, right? And we don't want to be worried about that because we want more voices than fewer voices. And you also might be avoiding addressing Fred because you agree with all the things that Fred says. And sometimes, if you are in agreement with the overtalker in the room, I want to encourage you. Are we too siloed in our thinking because we're not allowing other people? If the overtalker is always doing all the talking, that's giving you one viewpoint, and you have 6 other people in the room. So you want to hear from everybody, but if nobody knows that they can talk because Fred's always talking, then you are limiting your viewpoint. You're siloing the impact, and that overtalker is the one that's winning for the day. And so we want to change that, right? So we want to change that by restructuring the dynamics of the conversation. Give that over talker a time frame of how long they don't talk, how many people get to share before they do. Make it a fun game, right? Or be very direct and just say, Fred, you're doing too much talking. I need you to wait till everybody else goes. And when Fred wants to speak up, I'm going to say, Fred, time out. I want to hear from Joe. I want to hear from Sarah. I want to hear from Charlie, whoever it is, right? I want to create that structure where I'm facilitating who I want to hear from. And there are people that had somebody come up to me in a workshop and say, you asked me to wait, but I really wanted to say, I said, no, I appreciated that you waited. But the reality is you were talking and nobody else had the opportunity. We wanted to hear from everybody else. So facilitating in a team meeting, facilitating in a workshop, you can do it very much the same way. I've often walked up to people and put my hand on their shoulder before. When I'm asking a question to the room, I'll put my hand on the shoulder and I'll just give them the number 1 for a pause. And yes, I have permission to do that with people. So don't send me an email and say, you're encroaching on people's personal space. I always make sure I have that. But you want to give them those cues because a lot of times your overtalkers don't know, but it's up to you to manage the airtime. It's up to you to manage the space in every meeting with your team. All right. Here's another number 4, the cliquish collaborator. Do you like how I titled that? They're so cliquish. I don't like cliques. We have that happening at my son's school and it drives me bonkers. Come on, y'all are out of high school. This is the parents, people that are cliquish, and it's ridiculous. But let's talk about you and your teams. I digress. The cliquish collaborator usually forms tight and exclusive groups with people on the team, and they only talk with those people. They don't want to talk with other people. And then they gossip, right? And they foster divisiveness, and they don't do it in a way to be divisive, but that's what gossip does. It fosters divisiveness and it creates a toxic environment. And this cliquish person wants to keep the people that they know, like, and trust close. And then everybody else, they push them away. And why do they do that? It's a way that they build their own sense of trust and safety in the workplace. But when leaders don't address it, right? When leaders don't address it, well, you want to get to the reason why we don't address it, because a lot of times those gossip, cliquish people, they're like the cool kids and you want to be a part of it. So if you have a fear of alienating yourself from them, well, you're not in leadership to be liked. Let's just be clear. If you are in leadership to be liked, you're in the wrong role. And I'm sorry for your team, because that's really hard. When leaders are in leadership to be liked, or they lead from that place of, I want you all to like me, really, really like me, and you fear losing someone's then you're the biggest part of the problem, right? But if you want to address this cliquish behavior, you want to do it in a very direct manner, right? Don't dismiss it, right? Don't push it off as though it's no big deal. It's a big deal. When you see these little cliques, it's a big deal. They're plotting. And if they're not plotting against other members of the team, they might be plotting against you. So when you see these little cliques, you want to address it. How do you address it? Well, You want to talk to the team about it. What do we want to be known, seen, and celebrated for? How are we addressing? How are we cohesive and collaborative? What does that mean? And I get people, me and my flip charts, get them up on the wall. What does cohesive, collaborative look like on our team? How do we know we've got it when we've got it? What are those behaviors that we're modeling that we want to model, right? We want to encourage that cross pollination and cross collaboration with each other to solve for the very problem or challenge that we might be having. So we create open discussions, right? Where all voices are heard and people are working together collaboratively. And I want to take out that person that might be, just might be causing the biggest part of the challenge with their gossiping, right? I want to pull them out. So, and I want to talk to them aside, but then I want to feed them back in carefully with an identified role, because again, my thing is to make things inclusive for people to talk in our team meetings. Very important. Okay, so let's get to you, leader. So let's just break it down and get to you. What's really getting to you from stopping the addressing of these disruptive behaviors? Well, yes, you may have fear of fallout. You might fear that the team won't get along. You might fear losing high performers, right? I would fear it by not addressing it, because I would think your disruptive behaviors are going to push those people away. So that fear ought to be a driver for why versus avoiding it, but why to avoid it, because otherwise those high performers are going to go on to something else where they feel like the leader actually cares and the leader actually wants to make a difference in the team, right? So instead of having a fear of fallout, leader, I just want you to understand that disruption creates long-term damage. And if it goes unchecked, it creates catastrophic long-term damage. And losing one high performer to maintain a cohesive team, a high functioning team, you might think it could be worth it. If that, and I'll say it this way, I don't think I clarified that well enough yet. You may have a high performer that's causing these disruptive behaviors and you don't want to lose them. But I would rather lose one high performer so the other 6 people can rise up to be high performers, because 6 are better than one. But if one is sucking all the airspace, the 6 can't rise up. So I'm willing to lose them. I'm willing to let them go, because it may just not be the right fit. And that's okay too. If they can't step up and change and shift and adjust the behavior to become the right fit, then I want to help them into a different opportunity. So instead of fearing it, I want you to address it and coach people forward with the behaviors that you want to see, right? Okay. So you might also have a concern when it comes to addressing these behaviors of losing out in what we might call popularity. Like you might not be a popular leader because you're addressing the behaviors that you don't want. Well, guess what? I'm okay with that, because I would rather have the behaviors on a team that I want than the behaviors that I don't want. Because when I don't address those behaviors and when they get in my way, it becomes a bigger problem that I don't necessarily want to have to, it's not going to be helpful to have to handle this later. So the disruptive behaviors and transforming them, it makes me need to be the one that steps in, steps up, steps forward, and addresses them with people. I want to set clear group norms, right, with everyone. And I want to hold everyone to that we all are accountable. And I love the I commits. I will have people write, once we address the norms and we establish what the norms of behavior are, we create I commit statements, and everybody writes them, reads them. We put them on our desk. We have a list of them so that we can remind people what we committed to. That is a real important outcome to setting those group norms. I also want you as the leader to model the behavior that you want to see. Leaders need to model the communication, the engagement, the respect that they expect from their teams. When they do that, when they demonstrate that openness and that active listening, even humility, it sets a powerful example for the rest of the team. Some of the most healthiest teams that I've seen come from the model of the behaviors from the leaders at the top. And the most unhealthy, that's also true, come from the behaviors that are modeled at the top. I want you to involve your team in the solutions. You want to get collaboration. That's the whole goal. We want to turn these toxic behaviors around into collaborative opportunities for positive change. Because when disruption arises, we have power when we invite people to talk about it, discuss it, brainstorm it, right? That fosters collaboration and makes addressing issues in the future a lot less about blame and more about opportunity for improvement. When we're always talking about how we can improve, celebrating when we notice that people have, that's the other thing I cannot let this episode end without saying this. When you go in to disrupt change and you go in to make an impact to change people, leader, my challenge for you, my invitation for you is make sure you celebrate the positive when you see it and celebrate it often. You might think you are, make sure people feel that you are. Hey, how do you feel that I'm doing with acknowledging? Are you feeling seen? Are you feeling heard? Are you feeling acknowledged? I ask those questions. That's important. And why not? Because I want to know that I'm doing what I say and my people are getting what they need. Okay. So listen, the gritty truth is that leaders who avoid addressing disruptive behaviors probably have a variety of reasons why they do it. We talked about a few: fear of fallout and favoritism. They don't want to be disliked, right? They're afraid of that. But by ignoring that disruption, it only makes it worse. So by leaning into the discomfort, embracing accountability, creating a culture of openness, leader, you're going to transform. You're going to transform those moments of conflict into opportunities for growth and collaboration. But it's up to you to be the one to step in and make the decision to be a leader who doesn't stand for that disruption, but enhances the opportunity for it to be changed. And encourage people on your team, right? Encourage people on your team to speak up when they need to. And this is just your opportunity to take stock of your team, check in with them, see how they're doing, see what disruptive behaviors might be sliding by that no longer serve us in the workplace. And then I want you to set it up so that you can make a change to those behaviors now. Strengthen your team's performance. The cohesiveness and collaboration will all fall into line when you as the leader step up and lead. Hey, thank you so much for joining me in the sandbox today. What a fun conversation around turning that conflict into collaboration. There was a lot in there. And I want to encourage you. This isn't about you're going to listen to an episode and poof, you're going to be great at this. It's just like anything when you're developing a muscle, friend. You have to take some time to practice it, confront it, have the conversations, ask the powerful questions, get a peer around you to help you to understand maybe what holds you back from addressing the disruptive negative behaviors that are in your team environment, that are in your workplace. And maybe it is about reflecting on yourself and saying, what am I allowing that I no longer want to allow? You have that within you. So I just want to celebrate that you spent time in the sandbox with me today. Thank you. And my hope is that you're leaving with some new tools, tips, and strategies to navigate your personal leadership, your team leadership, and your next bold conversation in the workplace, addressing those disruptive behaviors. And hey, it would mean so much to me if you would take a moment to share this episode, click like, write a comment, share it with a friend, get on over to YouTube and join our YouTube channel so you can see the latest content that's coming out from the Leadership Sandbox. We're excited to be part of your community. And you know, friend, third-party affirmations go a long way in today's world economy. And I would be honored if you took a moment to share the value that you gained from spending time in the sandbox today. And remember, leadership isn't something that you're born with. It's something that you grow into. And I want to personally thank you for taking time to grow into your next level of leadership in the sandbox today. Make it a great day.